Perfect. Okay, thank you so much for being able to meet with me today. I really appreciate it. Um, my first question, easiest question of the day. Can you tell me your first and last name, and spell it out for me?
Sure. My name is Steve Lieberman. So Steveliberman.
And what is your title?
I'm Senior Director of Advocacy and Policy with the United Spinal Association.
Perfect. Um, so my story today, we're here in Tennessee, and one of our state lawmakers is proposing a bill that will allow women in their second or third trimester or have a high risk of pregnancy apply for temporary disabled parking permits. And I know there's a lot of discussion on how that would impact the disabled community. Can you tell me a little bit about your opinion on how that would impact them?
This is a well-meaning but flawed proposal. We've seen this pop up in other states. Florida passed a similar bill into law earlier this year. There have already been pretty severe challenges that have come out of Florida as a result. Florida, in effect, has invented placard tourism through their state highway division. They proposed guidance that allows any pregnant woman to come from out of state and obtain a placard. So effectively, you could go to Disney, and on your way to Disney, if you stopped off at a doctor's office for a signature, all you need to obtain a placard from Florida if you're a pregnant woman is the signature of a Florida doctor, your driver's license, and $15. And then you can take that placard home with you, which would exacerbate the current challenges that we're seeing with the availability of accessible parking. Now, accessible parking is something that most folks walk by every day and have no idea that there are severe challenges, but it's true. And we, for the last 4 years, have been documenting and identifying the very serious problems that currently exist with accessible parking. The current federal standards require that between 2 and 4% of all parking spaces have to be accessible spaces. Of those, 1 in 6 have to be van accessible spaces. So we're already seeing we already have not that many accessible parking spaces to begin with. But we kept hearing from our members, hey, I'm having a problem finding a parking spot. And this is over and over and over, regardless of where they live, regardless of what state, whether they're urban, suburban, rural, it's everywhere. And so we looked into, well, how many people are currently legally able to park in those spaces? And based on the data we collected from 20 states, we found that close to 10% of the vehicles on the road have access to a disabled license plate or hanging placard. So we're currently trying to fit about 10% of the vehicles into 4% of the spaces. The math doesn't work. And so, as well meaning as this proposal is, when we already are having severe challenges getting those folks who need access to those spots to be able to park there, we just can't add any more folks that aren't covered by the ADA. If we don't have enough spaces for the folks that are covered by the ADA, then how on earth can we add any eligibility for any additional groups? The math just doesn't add up.
And I saw in a Facebook post of discussion about this too. What are your thoughts on, I know small private businesses have been putting up specific reserve spots for expecting mothers. How do you feel about maybe the state going that route instead of, letting them park in disabled parking spots?
Yeah, that's our preferred solution. As long as those spaces aren't taken from existing accessible parking, we would have no objection to separate expectant mom spots, which we've seen in, many private businesses have done that. Where I live in Maryland, I see that, at in shopping centers here, and that's been going on for many years, and it works well. So when you think about a parking lot that has 100 spaces, Currently, four of those spaces by law are required to be accessible spaces. We wouldn't have an issue with another one or two of those remaining 96 spaces being designated as expectant mom spots, as long as it didn't impact existing accessible parking, which we think, needs to be at the very least doubled based on the numbers that we're seeing.
What would be your message to those expected mothers who like the idea of having, being able to use these disabled spots? What would you tell them and about how it would impact those who need it not just when they're pregnant, but all the time?
Yeah, so especially for those pregnant women who may be having complications. If you have complications with your pregnancy, you should know you're already able to get a temporary placard under the law. So under the ADA, certain complications of pregnancy, such as gestational diabetes or preeclampsia, you can already go to your doctor and get their help in obtaining a temporary placard. And I have two kids. I experienced, with my wife when she was pregnant. I totally understand the challenges that come from pregnancy. However, these spots are set aside for folks for a reason under the ADA. So the most important feature of accessible parking is not the proximity to the building, it's the access aisles. And you may not even know that they're called access aisles. It's the striped off area in between the accessible parking spaces. So those access aisles are there so that wheelchair users can extend a ramp from the side of their vehicle down to the pavement so they can get in and out of their vehicle from the side. When they don't have access to the access aisles, they can't get in and out of their car. So we see routinely folks who park in the access aisles, park partially in the access aisles. There are shopping carts that are left there. Motorcycles are parked in the access aisles. There's all kinds of obstructions to access aisles that we see on a daily basis. And I would encourage folks to, just take a look around when you're out. Look around your parking lot and see, are the cars in the accessible parking spaces parked fully in the lines? Are there things left in the access aisles? These are challenges that wheelchair users in particular have to overcome on a daily basis. So let's say, somebody is a wheelchair user, they go out for a nice dinner with their family. They come back to their vehicle, somebody's parked in the access aisle next to their vehicle. They can't get back in their car, they can't go home. These folks need the access aisles in order to be able to live fully independent lives. And, of course, we don't want to make things harder for pregnant women. But given just how broken accessible parking is in Tennessee and across the country, we got to fix what's broken with accessible parking first. And if there are additional spaces that can be designated for pregnant women, we'd have no problem with that.
And I've heard discussion that at least in the state of Tennessee, um, you mentioned this a little bit. Certain pregnant women, complications of pregnancy, can already apply for disabled parking. Is that the case all throughout the United States as well?
That's correct.
Is there anything else I didn't specifically ask you that you would like people to know about this issue or this topic with, a lot of not just Tennessee, but other states mentioned Florida. I know Illinois are wanting to do, Illinois and Florida already have these bills, but is there anything else that I didn't specifically ask you that you would want people to know that on how this impacts the disabled community?
Yeah, I mean, accessible parking, the problems with accessible parking really boil down to three main buckets. It's the imbalance of parking supply versus demand, which we've already discussed. We're currently cramming 10% of the vehicles into 4% of the spots. Second, it's the general lack of awareness of accessible parking laws. Folks don't know what access aisles even are. There's frequent violations of um, the access aisles and accessible parking spots, who's legally able to park there, and so on. And the third is general lack of enforcement. You know, state and local law enforcement need to put a higher priority on doing accessible parking enforcement. Not every state, and I don't know what the case is in Tennessee, not every state empowers law enforcement to do accessible parking enforcement in private lots and garages. I know Illinois does. They have an order from their attorney general that has been in place for a number of years and works very well. Um, we know that there isn't a current national standard for what placards are supposed to look like. They vary from state to state. There's a lot of placard fraud out there. Folks are ordering fake placards off the internet. They're called novelty placards. They say in tiny little text at the bottom, not a state issued placard. And folks are buying these and hanging these on their, from their rearview mirror, and folks aren't really bothering to check. Um, there are also websites, we call these placard mills, where folks are able to have one televisit with a doctor that they've never met and never will meet again, to obtain a placard, through the internet. I mean, I think most reasonable people would think if you need a placard, you should probably talk to your doctor who knows you, in order to be able to get that placard. There's also a whole lot of folks who are, um, using, let's say grandma passes away, the placard is still active. Folks pass it around among family members, in order to, get these spots. Accessible parking is not a perk. It's an accommodation. It's something that's there in order for people to be able to park safely and be able to get in and out of their vehicle. So let's say someone is blind. They have a placard because they have a family member who drives them. Obviously, they don't drive themselves, but they need to be able to safely get to where they need to go, so they don't have to navigate a parking lot, where they could be struck because, obviously they're using a cane or what have you. And they need to be able to get to where they need to go safely. Let's say someone is, again, a wheelchair user, or maybe a little person, someone who's at a shorter height. Perhaps someone who's in a big truck is not going to be able to see someone who's at a shorter height as they go through the parking lot, and we don't want anyone to be struck. So I think it's important that we recognize that accessible parking is, it exists for a series of reasons. And of course, we want to make sure that we don't impose additional burdens on folks who are, experiencing things that can cause hardship. But, this thing is broken and we got to fix it. And hopefully, Tennessee legislators are going to recognize that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to talk to me about this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, it was very nice meeting you. I hope you have